Hello, still good morning. I hope you still have some sugar in your blood before lunch to survive this last presentation. It won't be long, just 1.5 hours maximum. First of all, I must say that we are total newcomers in this world of digital printing. And still here I am in front of you trying to make a presentation about something that might be interesting for you. Our company, Gemini CAD Systems, let me see if I'm using this correct. Okay. So we are newcomers in digital textile printing, but we are not at all newcomers in the textile industry. We are a company with more than 15 years of experience, and we provide CAD solution. I heard Debbie earlier talking about CAD, and she mentioned immediately Photoshop and Illustrator. These are the kind of applications, software applications, which are usually associated to digital printing. However, here we talk about textile digital printing. And this fabric, which is printed, will eventually become a sewn product. Not all the fabrics, but 90% of the fabrics will be cut and sewn. And it is not the job of Photoshop or Illustrator to take care of this activity of designing the shape, cutting and preparing for sewing. Our job as a company, as a CAD company, computer aid design, is the shape of the product, or to be more precise, the shape of the components which will eventually become the product. So it is our job to draw the shape of some patterns, to cut the fabric, and provide all the information for sewing and assembling the fabric. So how comes our company, or not only our company, but several major players, we are one of the top 5 players in the CAD for textile sewn products. How come we almost never interfere with this world of digital printing? Well, the answer is quite simple. Printing was never associated to the other parts of producing a sewn object, a sewn product. Printing was a job of a company, then they deliver the fabric, and somebody else must cut it and prepare it and sew it and put it all together. And of course it worked. You are wearing a very nice shirt with something printing on it. Yeah. So obviously the industry is working this way. However, if we want to talk about automation, if we want to talk about Industry 4.0, we will soon realize, and this is what's happening right now in the industry, that having a totally separate view and understanding of the industry will not allow us to create this integrated and automated process. That is why in 2017, right here in Frankfurt, Messe, in May, it was Text Process exhibition, and this is our booth where for the first time we set foot in our new world, in the digital printing world. Basically, from the CAD industry, from the software industry providing CAD solution, not only for apparel, but also for furniture, for home decoration, anything which is a sewn product, a soft sewn product, we realize that we need to turn our eyes and widen our view and to incorporate the digital printing problems. And it was not at all easy. First of all, we discovered that there is a huge, I wouldn't say confusion, but it's a situation which creates lack of efficiency, even in a conference like this, because here we talk about digital textile printing. However, this simple definition incorporates many applications which are so different that simply the technology used for each of them is totally different. If we talk about printing 1,000 square meter or 100,000 square meters of fabric using a digital printing machine, it's a totally different business than printing 500 cushions or printing some bicycle sportswear or printing anything which has a shape. And more, on top of it, it might be also customized in terms of shape and content. The machines, the technology, the software, the entire workflow is totally different. Yes, maybe at a certain moment somebody will ask, okay, what kind of printing head are you using? What kind of pigment? What kind of transfer technology you are using? But except this last point where you actually put the color on the white fabric, everything else is different. And because it's different, there is a waste of energy and resources by putting together in the same room, in the same conference, in the same discussions, in the same advertising materials, people with totally separate interests from technological point of view, from business model point of view. As you remember a few slides earlier, I told you that our job is the shape. So probably here in the room, at least half of you are more preoccupied about how to print a full roll of, I don't know, some repetitive patterns, which eventually will become, I don't know, a curtain or a dress or something. In this case, my presentation is not relevant. This kind of business is replacing the traditional analog printing, which is producing rolls of fabric, which are going to be cut and transformed on a traditional process. However, if we speak about printing something which has a shape, and I give you just the most basic example. I want to produce a pillow, a cushion, with a big happy birthday on it. Yeah? Web to print. I heard Debbie mention it over and over. And now it was a technical glitch. Yeah? But actually web to print, it's a huge business. But when you want to print something on a product, it's not just the print, the artwork itself. It's also the shape of the product. Who's taking care of the shape? Photoshop cannot handle cutting instruction. Adobe Illustrator cannot handle nesting. There is no application to scan the printed fabric and then to check the distortions and then to cut on it. All these components exist, but they exist in different industries, totally separated, and nobody put it all together in just one single box until now. So why a discussion like this, which is basically about what it's before printing and what it's after printing, but not the printing itself. If you ask me, I barely am a little bit familiar with the vocabulary of, I don't know, sublimation or pigments or something. I don't know this middle word, the printing, but I know what's before and what's after printing. Why is this important for you? Because if we want to make a fully automated process, and that's the only chance of the industry to survive and to grow, textile digital printing cannot be separated from the rest of the chain when you produce the sewn goods. And there are problems related to the business model, to the technological challenges, and of course the long-term automation strategy. And you probably witnessed a very sharp approach in the presentation between the last two presentations here. It was a very nice and warm, and from the design side from Debbie, and then we went to the very pragmatic world of producing millions and millions of goods. In order to be able to make this step, we must widen our view and see what's before and after printing. So for us, very important is to understand and to make the first basic separation. When does the artwork meet the fabric? Because you can have digital printed fabrics, that means you produce rolls and later you transform it into something. Or you print on fabric, but you print some parts which already have a shape. You produce an umbrella. An umbrella is made out of 8 triangles. A cushion, it's made of few rectangles. A t-shirt, whatever you have, it's an object made of components which already have a shape. And the artwork must be placed on a shape in a certain position. And already when we talk about this way of producing digitally printed soft goods, it's totally different than printing the raw fabric. And the last one is when you already have the product, you already have the cushion or you have the white t-shirt, and you apply directly to the product. And in this case, probably you have a small printer, you are a boutique in a corner, or maybe you are a big factory producing customized goods by applying directly to the product. But the technology is totally different. From our point of view, when we talk about the middle part, because again, shape, this is where we are specialized, in the middle, where we already have a shape in our mind, and that shape must be designed somehow. There are several applications. We were born and raised, and this is our main experience, in the middle, in the apparel. In sportswear and in high-end fashion, we have the shape, because this defines the product, and we have the artwork applied on the shape. But the same problems appears in soft signage. Whenever you have an object which is made of fabric, and by the way, this is the trend of switching more and more to soft signage, you have shapes, because this product, this final object must exist somewhere in real life. Yeah? And of course we have it in home furnishing. I would say that home furnishing is probably the place where our ability to deal with shapes is really not speculated at its highest value, because most of the shapes are rectangles. But still, however, you still have the same problem. There are 2 ways of producing sewn, printed textile products. First of all, you need to obtain the parts. That's the first step. You must produce the cut printed parts, and step number 2 is assembly by sewing. I will focus on the first step, in producing the cut printed parts. There are 2 ways of doing this. The way they do it now, in 99% of the situations, it's to cut white parts and to apply the artwork by dye sublimation. Yeah. And you'll be surprised to hear that, for example, in sportswear, and this is a multi-billion euro industry only in Europe, this is how 10 out of 10 biggest European producer of sportswear produce their entire volume. So they cut white parts, and then imagine it's a purely manual process. You will see it later in my presentation. Yeah. And the other way is to print the shapes on a fabric, on a long piece of fabric, and then cut it. Obviously, this second approach has a much bigger potential for automation, and you will see immediately why. So I told you that most of the production today, especially for this kind of small goods, it's made through this method. Cut the white parts and then apply it manually. Of course, it's high labor and there is absolutely no perspective for automation in this process. There is a huge logistic cost to handle these white parts because you need storage. You don't cut one by one, you cut usually multiply, and then you need an intermediate storage for this, and you need to place it in the storage and retrieve it from storage. And most of the biggest problem right now is the fact that this method is totally not compatible with any direct-to-fabric printing technology. Yeah? So it's strictly linked to the dye sublimation, where you can take the white part and put it on a piece of paper. Yeah? Otherwise, I would say 100% of the other printing methods can only be performed on roll fabric. Yeah? So there is no future in cutting the white parts and then applying the artwork on it. This will become more and more marginal, again, because there is no perspective of automation and the costs are very, very high. Printing the fabric and then cutting the shapes is obviously the future. However, it's not so simple. Yeah? This is a very simple example. You have a surface where you have many shapes, printed shapes, and then you have a cutting machine, a CNC machine, which can be an automatic machine. Probably this machine will have some sort of camera, a visual recognition system, which will identify the position of what you printed, and it will cut. This technology is not new. It's something which exists, I don't know, within the past 20 years. It used to be expensive. Now you buy a $500 cutter plotter and it has a camera on the head and it can recognize the shape. However, what is very important is all this technology was not developed for textile. It was actually developed for packaging. And it was adopted to cut textile. And because it was not originally developed for cutting textile, but rather carton and stiff objects, rigid objects, it has huge limitations in dealing with the real problems of textile handling and cutting. And then I come back and I say, yes, there are hundreds of cutters fitted with visual recognition system, which can cut textile, and there are plenty of companies using today this process. However, if you ask what is the level of automation, you'll realize that, oh, I'm still using Adobe Illustrator to generate the shapes, and I'm making the nesting by hand, or there is no nesting at all, or I must use a third-party application to make the nesting and there is no communication between them. And then when you go into details and say, I have a fabric with a huge distortion, yeah, it elongated a lot during the printing and treatment, and I must cut exactly 80 by 80 centimeters square. I must negotiate a little bit how to place this fixed shape on my artwork, which is now printed but is distorted. Now my artwork is 87 centimeters. And if you do it by hand, you will find a compromise. And people have the skills and they have the rules. Sometimes these rules are not written, they are just the power of habit, but they do it. All these cutting systems which come from packaging cannot handle this kind of problems. So on this background, we discovered that, number one, the only chance to have a fully automated evolution is to print and cut. Number two, there are no specialized tools to generate the content for the printer in order to print and cut. And number three, the cutting solutions were not adapted and they were not originally developed for textile cutting. So we discovered that actually our expertise that we accumulated helped us to find a very, very simple solution to this problem. So we are a CAD software. That means we basically design the shapes again, which is quite boring compared to the huge problems in digital printing. We just design shapes. So what we did is something very simple. We enabled our environment to be able to handle digital printing content. That means the PDF or EPS files that you prepare for the printer, instead of sending it directly to the RIP, or instead of trying to make this job in Illustrator and combining there and making a nest by hand for your job, we enable our environment, which is a environment specialized for designing, nesting, cutting, and eventually sewn products. We enable our software to be able to import this file and, of course, to place it on the surface. Most of my examples you see are from sportswear, but the same applies when you have, I don't know, a chair or a cushion or whatever. Even if you have some bed sheets and you want the printing, the artwork to match an exact position on the product, you need to have, now, number one, you need to have the shape of the product and you need to have the artwork and you need to place it. And this is something what people do today, but they do it in an unspecialized environment. They do it in Illustrator or in CorelDRAW. And after they do it there is no future because there is no nesting, there is no cutting, there is no seam allowance, there are no buttonholes, nothing related to textile processing. Yeah? So if you produce an umbrella, probably you will be happy with the Illustrator. But if you go beyond this point, limitation will start to appear. What we can do is use our capabilities that we developed in many years. Imagine we have more than 20,000 factories around the world and some of the biggest fashion brands in the world working with our solutions as we speak. Of course, cutting just plain fabric with nothing on it. But because we have this huge experience, we know, for example, how to interface with the new online sales methods or marketing. We are able to handle orders from a web platform. We are able to handle orders from a made-to-measure input, whether it's a web platform or a point of sale or whatever. So we were able to apply the same techniques in handling the customized artwork on the object. And then because we already have our methods of checking, again, this is an example from a t-shirt, but you can automatically simulate the sewing of the product. You can see if the lines are matching, if the artwork is correctly placed on different sizes. If you have a web service to produce made-to-measure cushions with the print content on demand, then your customer will input the dimensions probably and will select a file, a bitmap or a TIFF file. And using this application, you are able to fully automate the process and to have this product in hand. Yeah? You can even change from the artwork automatically. You produce, again, cushions. This example is so boring. When I had this presentation, it was at least with the football players. You have the basic design, and then the software will automatically change, for example, the name of each player, or in our case, each beneficiary of Happy Birthday cushion. automatically from a database, from a web service where you receive the order. And then because we are in a specialized environment for producing sewn products, we have, of course, automatic nesting with a very high efficiency, which is very specific to apparel and textile solutions. And then we have possibility to export the print job to any printer. I don't know, I created, this is my job for today on this kind of fabric. I create a 100 or 200 meter printing job and I send it to the printer, and in the same time I generate the cut file which goes to the cutter. In this case I can use any kind of printer. It can be roll-to-roll sublimation if I want, if I prefer sublimation, or it can be any kind of direct-to-fabric printer. I just generate a printer file 100 meter long and that's it. And I expect at the end to have 100 meters of fabric, which eventually my cutter will be able to scan, identify the distortions, and handle the distortion in a way which is very typical for textile cutting and textile assembling by sewing. And all this information comes from the design step. When I design the cushion, when I design my t-shirt, I specify there are some critical points where I want the artwork to match. And the automated system will handle this information, will scan the real fabric, will identify the distortion, and will attempt to make the matching exactly in the points which I specify. And still there is, in the entire process, one point where we still need an operator collecting the parts. There are a lot of robotic methods to collect the part and to assemble it, but still you cannot rely 100% that the cutting is complete. That's why we still need an operator. But at least this operator is assisted by an augmented reality video projection system, which will tell him exactly, pick the blue part, put it in the blue basket. Pick the red part, put it in the red basket. Basically, I would say that 90% of what I showed you now is not something new even in our company, but it was something which has never been mixed with digital printing. We have this cutting and collecting assisted by augmented reality. We have the vision cut solution to scan a real fabric to make a matching of printed patterns. Everything this existed. The only new part is that now we accept to import the digital artwork to be printed. That's it. I hope you understood a little bit my struggle. Thank you.